I never fit into either or. I'm not what maybe you wouldn't call me a sculptor, right? Or I work with clay, so that makes me a potter, I guess. But my work is in the middle of this sculpture vessel, so it's unique. So there's no real place for it, you know, in the way things are set up. Coils that we all learned, the generic coil, but when I studied in college, I studied with Fred Owen, who taught me a different way of coiling, which is what I still use, that method. And he, being the instructor, brought with him all this knowledge that he had learned from Eastern Canada. And the method that I'm going to show you here is using coils of clay that are turned into belts of clay, rather than just a simple coil, and placing coils on top of one another. So in that method that we all learned when we were in kindergarten and elementary school, you'd roll out your coil like snakes or worms, and then you could take a long one and just kind of go around and around. But one of the things that they always taught you was to make this slip called like glue that you would put between the coils, and then you could sort of cross hatch it and then put them together and then join them that way. But what Fred did was he developed this technique of rolling out the coils, flattening the coils to belts of clay that were, you know, maybe a quarter of an inch thick, and rather than placing them on top of one another, he would overlap them and then pinch them together. And so that is huge in hand building. It really gives you a lot of strength, and it gives me the ability to do the kind of sculptural work that I do because of that strength that it gives you, that added strength. And then what I did from that was I took that, and when I started to develop pods out of these olas, to me, making an ola is like learning to make a cylinder on the wheel. It's the essential core shape or form that you need to understand before you take it out. And so when I started to become proficient at making them, I started to develop pods. And in order to achieve these pods, these vessels that were, you know, just taut and coming out in this kind of manner, I started to use those straps of clay vertically. And up until then, there was no need to use vertical coils or these vertical straps of clay. But I needed to develop something to give me what I was looking for. And so when I started putting those inside, I would actually literally join them and bring them out and push the clay out until it was as thin as how I started. And then I would add more coils on the outside in order to achieve this taut, you know, full sort of vessel or sculpture, whatever you want to call it. I think what it was I was a hand builder, and I wanted to learn as much as I could about hand building and good, strong technique. And the focus at that time was throwing, very much thrown, and either that or sculpture. So it was one or the other. There was no in-between. There was no this notion that a vessel could become something other than just a vessel, right? Or a container, or something that was utilitarian in this area, in British Columbia and BC. Even though I am First Nations, and you know, even though I was looking at Indigenous people, it wasn't because I was drawn to it because there was an affinity of being First Nations. It wasn't that at all. It was just simply looking for good technical information on hand building. And I've always been very careful about not labeling myself as an Indian potter. So it doesn't matter how small or how big I'm working with coils, I always use this kind of method to make them. So you can see how thin and strong you can get them. So then I'll take the piece that I started and overlap the coil. And I just tack it on to begin with, and then I'll go back. Hand building is a series of little repetitive steps. My work and working with clay isn't about how people feel about my work or wanting to get my work out there. My work is very intimate, and it's very much about my relationship, my personal way of addressing the things in the world that I think are beautiful, that are inspiring to me, like petals unfurling or pods about to burst out of there. And of course I love gardening and things like that, and looking at those kinds of things. So I don't make work to sell my work. I'm not doing it for that. I'm a teacher. I can make money a lot of different ways. I do it because I love to do it, and I do it because I honor the earth, and that's my way of honoring the earth, right? Working with fire, very ethereal. Working with clay, that whole combination, very mysterious. I purposely work with sawdust because it's unpredictable. And I like the fact that I am not making the final statement, that my relationship with the earth is one thing. I'm involved in that process. I like the solitude, I like the quietness, I like the sound that's made when you're burnishing, when you're touching the surface. It's a chance for me to get to look at what I've done and feel what I've done. But then I give it away, I give it back to the earth. And the earth says, it has the final say of what comes out. And it's never disappointing because I don't have an expectation. I don't say I'm going to put that red glaze on it, it's going to come out red, and if it doesn't, well, it means nothing to me. So it's the other way. It's like, there it is. It's out of my hands, and I'm never disappointed. There's always something that is beautiful about that process of letting the fire just do what it wants to do. And then of course the burnishing, it has depth to it, like a glaze has depth to it. It's not just a surface. There's things that happen, the undulation of the flame, there's where the carbon doesn't hit, and it's the clay body, and the in-between of those things that happen. So it's that process. And it takes probably about a day, 2 days. It sits in this chamber, a very simple firebox. And then when you open it up, there's no sawdust left at all. There's just the pots that are sitting there.